Toledo musician, music fan, and so on. It's great to be able to assemble some friends, fellow musicians, and colleagues for this particular event. And we're grateful for folks sticking around for this particular session. Because, of course, a constant theme that's come up, say, in Sam Dunn's Metal A Headbanger's Journey, or in Jeremy's opening remarks, that the scene goes beyond what's happening in New York and Los Angeles. In fact, it's places like Toledo that also help to keep a scene going. And that's important to note. With us today are our illustrious panelists, Todd Evans from Mobile Death Camp, formerly of Guar, Kevin Keeks, bass player from Damien. He's also done a lot of work with David Chastain. Chuck Stoll from Damien. Bill Getz, collector enthusiast. Steve Zarodniak, legendary guitarist, collector, enthusiast. Andy Wendler from the Necros, Gone in 60 Seconds, as well as numerous other music entities in and around our area. This is by no means exhaustive of all the individuals involved in the Toledo metal scene and the Toledo rock and roll scene, and we do want to make sure that folks are aware of that. And this little brief slideshow is mainly just as a reference point as far as some of the musical happenings that's going on in our region of the country. In my reference to my talk on the heavy metal t-shirt, I brought up the phrase that's often referred to in Ohio as so goes Ohio, so goes the nation. And this is important in reference to how Ohio can sometimes play as the standard bearer of what's going to happen culturally and politically in the rest of the United States. And so, in reference to our Ohio heritage, our regional heritage, perhaps our most famous figure is Art Tatum, legendary jazz pianist. And of course, as we move along, and again, this is by no means exhaustive, the Heinz Farm Blues Club, which is located out by the Toledo Express Airport, out in the rural part of the hinterland, if you will, of Toledo, also played a key role in reference to the development of blues, rhythm and blues in our region of the country. It was the premier blues and rhythm and blues clubs in America, believe it or not, right here in our northwestern Ohio area, with many of our local legends who are no longer with us, Big Jack Reynolds, Art and Roman Griswold, and so on, performing there and helping to establish the scene there. As we scroll forward into our history, of course, we have to highlight Johnny and the Hurricanes instrumental group, kind of this early garage rock, punk rock, if you will. We also have to highlight the Detroit connection, which I definitely think that I know many of our members will speak to today. And that has to be represented, of course, with the MC5, the Stooges, and as we continue, we get into something like, Ted Nugent, but also something that we often talk about is how the live venue plays such a key role in the development or the maintaining of a scene. And I know for all of us, the Toledo Sports Arena played such a key role in exposing us to metal bands, rock and roll bands, live experiences, and so on. As we kind of move along the time continuum, you also have to give props to record stores, because the record stores also played such a key role, and of course Boogie Records was one of the key record stores in our regions of the country. That was one of the few places, Boogie Records, Toucan, Special Records, some of the few places that you could actually get metal sound recordings. Again, as we kind of move along, you have to highlight the work of the Necros and Touch and Go Records. Touch and Go Records from our region of the country, absolutely crucial and vital. There's a lot of talk about Pig Destroyer today, the metal band, Screamo metal band, Pig Destroyer, but you ain't seen nothing yet until you've seen John Brannon from Negative Approach on vocals, absolutely going off. the Necros' contribution also is key, because the Necros really blending this kind of hard rock, punk rock, heavy metal, and again, one of the legendary albums in this regard was Tangled Up. Also, as we continue along, the music scene also played a key in reference to the Detroit scene and what was going on in Detroit, and also the influence that I would have to say really the Necros had on the Misfits. Perhaps if there wasn't this close connection between the Necros and the Misfits, would an album like Earth AD be made? I would actually have to say probably not, because that was something that was happening here in Ohio, was this kind of metal punk rock crossover that then the Misfits later got exposed to. Also, you have to highlight the music virtuosity of Damien. They have been going for they're on their 30th anniversary. They have a show, actually, ironically, scheduled for next Saturday at Roxanne's, another legendary club that played such a key role in the development of metal. Yeah, metal and hard rock. But we know it as Roxanne's, but they changed the name a little bit. And of course, you have to highlight some of our regional players in reference to Sin Club Entertainment, Ed Shaborsky and Sin Club Entertainment, in his publication of The Glass Eye, which Martin Popoff had written for quite many articles. And of course, Ed Shaborsky bringing out numerous sound recordings, one of those being the punk metal, rap metal, Porn Flakes, and of course we've got this project that I've got going on now, Mad 45, and then we also have our infamous Mobile Death Camp. So it's such a pleasure to be able to present this material for folks today. So, with that in mind, what I thought we would do is just kind of open it up to the floor. How did you guys get introduced to music, and how did you get introduced to heavy metal, and what made you want to take up a music instrument to play metal? And we're just kind of keep it loose and open here.
Well, when I was younger, I used to listen to records, and I heard classical music, and I really thought classical music had something magical, and I didn't really understand what I was listening to, but I thought it was really cool. And I just was always putting on records. When I'm talking to a little kid, I wanted to listen to I don't know, Stravinsky, Bach, Beethoven, all that, and I'm sitting there going, wow, where did this stuff come from? You know, it was magical. But I remember going on, and that kind of was lingering around, and of course that was a short period. And then later, I remember when I was probably maybe a young teenager, I went down the street to a friend's house, and his older brother was playing. There was some music coming from his bedroom upstairs, and it was so heavy and dark. I said, what in the heck? I had to know what it was. And it was Sweet Leaf from Black Sabbath. And it was on, like, it might have been on a phone. It was on a record. And I said, hey, can I go out there and find out what that is? Like, I don't know. I had to have that record because I said, this is the coolest thing I ever heard. I think I love music. You know, I mean, because it was so powerful and exciting. I said, how did they create that sound? That, you know, what is this? So anyway, that got me started, and I started collecting all the, you know, went and bought the records. And then I heard they were going to be at the sports arena in 1975. And I think I had a little Stingray bicycle, and I rode it to get my ticket, and it's so crazy, me and George Presser. I mean, I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I wonder what this is going to be like. I think it was like my second time, so I think I saw Aerosmith. But this one, I was actually kind of scared, because I listening to Black Sabbath in my basement over and over with the lights out, and I'm going, I was actually wondering if I was going to survive it, because I was scared a little bit, but I said, I got to see this band, these sorcerers, you know, whatever they were. And it was wild, because I remember they came on, and it's just the wall of sound they had, and Tony and Naomi up there, and Geezer, and, you know, Ozzy. It was like, what is going, it was like I felt like I was at some ceremony, you know, and I said, man, this is so cool. And I just, you know, was a fan ever since. And of course, then you know, I was always amazed at, you know, Tony and Naomi's playing and all that. And then, of course, as I kept listening to records, I discovered UFO, and, you know, I said, wow, this Michael Schenker, he might even be, you know, a little more, he's a more intense lead player, and I got into the guitar and all that like that. And of course, Dean Big and all that stuff. But somewhere along, I was playing drums early on, and they are so loud that I realized that practicing every day was driving my parents crazy. You know, I wanted to be that, you know, like Cody Rich or something. You know, and I remember one of my buddies was down in the basement playing the drum kit that we got. It was an old used kit from down the street, something we bought real cheap. Anyways, but it was so loud, I felt the floorboard shake, and I thought, you know, I actually felt guilty. I didn't want to practice drums with my parents. You know what I mean? I thought, this is so loud. How can I do this to my parents? And there was some guy had a guitar. One of my buddies, I haven't seen him for 30 years. He had an inexpensive electric guitar, and I was over his house, and I was kind of thinking around with it. And he says, "Well, take it home, and if you like it, you know, I'll sell it to you." And I think it was like $80 or something. And it's funny because I rode my bike over there, and I'm riding on a little Stingray or something, you know, a bicycle with a guitar. And I'm thinking, it was an SG. It was like a red copy thing, but it was interesting because I didn't even know how to tune it. I was just kind of, and I started just playing around, and I had a little inexpensive one of those air keyboard organ things, and I put like a weight with a battery on it and put a note down, and I would play notes against it, and I was figuring out what notes I liked, you know, and I was always going for these darker notes. Way back then, I could hear the reference of it. That's just, I don't know, I'll let someone else talk for a minute, but that's kind of how I got going. You know.
Andy, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got introduced to music, metal, and kind of this connection between punk and metal, an instrument.
I just kind of started out always being interested in music as long as I can remember. My dad used to go to work, and I'd sneak his Marty Robbins records and Wayne Newton records on and just be fascinated by it. And I remember being 8 years old and calling CKLW to request like Donny Osmond songs. I mean, really, as ridiculous as that sounds, it just something about the music. And as I got older, I remember a friend took me over, we were hanging out, I was probably 13, 14 years old, and we went over to this girl's house. And he was there for the girl, but she put on Night at the Opera by Queen. And Death on Two Legs come on, and I just remember sitting there like in a daze, and he was trying to hit on a girl or whatever, and I was just, all I cared about was that music. And I went home and asked my parents to buy me that record, Night at the Opera. And I became like a Queen freak, and then that became my first concert I ever saw. In 8th grade, I begged my parents to go see Queen. And I was walking from my house to the sports arena, and as I walked past the old Holiday Inn downtown, a limousine pulled up, and they got out of the limos and walked in the hotel. And even back then, I was just stunned by even being across the street from these guys, that they made this kind of music, and that I could even like
breathe the air they're near.
Yeah, breathe the same air or something. So then after that, I got a little more into rock and stuff, and I wanted to start playing guitar because I saw Ted Nugent, and that made me want to start playing guitar. And I got a whole beat up acoustic guitar, and I sucked for years, and but I just stayed persistent at it. And then I remember going to Southwood Mall and seeing an album by a band called Judas Priest. And I'd never heard of the band, but I thought that's got to be a cool band because that name is cool. And it was the album Stained Class. And I took that home and put it on, and Exciter came on with the drum beat and those guitars and those vocals. And I'd never heard anything like that. And that just, all this Ted Nugent and everything before that was kind of like rock, but this was all of a sudden like this dark metal. And Rob Halford's vocals, and I just played that record over and over and over, and I drove my parents crazy with it too. But my dad knew the lyrics of the song, and you know, just from hearing it so often. But then I eventually started going to concerts. I started playing in bands, and we started playing stuff like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden had their first album out or two, and we had this little clique of people who didn't, that knew of Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and stuff, but it was like these weren't known bands at all. It was like an underground type of thing. And so we started learning those songs, and we were in people's backyards playing stuff like Victim Changes and Rush songs and stuff like that. And And then I remember going to see Judas Priest live, and there was nobody there at the Toledo Sports Arena. And Jeff Leppard, Judas Priest, and Scorpions. You could walk right to the front of the stage because there was nobody there. I thought they were going to cancel the show. And but I remember just standing in front of them, and they put on an incredible show. It was just obvious that it didn't matter how many people was there. They were just over-the-top performance. And I remember walking home from that show going, this is what I want to do with my life. You know, I want to be KK Downing. I want to be, this is what I have to do. And I remember being into sports and playing football and stuff, and my dad wanted me to pursue sports and try out for quarterback, and I was kind of like, well, I'll try out for quarterback if you'll buy me that new Judas Priest album. And it ended up became my parents' loss, and I got out of sports and into music. But from there, I played in a bunch of bands until I somehow ran into Damien, and I went to see. I used to go watch these guys because they were like my favorite band. Yeah, no, I won't tell that story. But once I got into the metal and everything, Damien was the band around that was playing not only original stuff, but they were also playing UFO and Priest and stuff like that. So I started following these guys, and you know, eventually one thing led to another, and it became the band. But that's about how it started for me.
And Todd, maybe you can talk a little bit too. Same wavelength. You know, how'd you get interested in music? How'd you end up taking up a musical instrument? How'd you get into metal?
Well, first I want to thank you for bringing us in here to do this, man. I want to say that I'm flattered you asked me to join this, sit here in this panel, these dudes that I respect so highly. You know, just still giddy because part of the story is well, okay, my dad's a hillbilly. So there was always guitars and banjos around the house. So I was always plunking around on something. When I decided to play, I had cousins that were like 4, 5, 6 years older than me, and they were in band. And I don't know what they played, and even if they were any good, but I was probably 10 years old, and I would just stand in front of them and watch them. That's awesome, I gotta have a guitar, and all the noise. And then, so they gave me Black Sabbath, Paranoid, and Deep Purple, Machine Head were the first albums I had at like young. And then they got me into Kiss, and then I started like, I wanted to play, I wanted to listen to heavy music. I thought it was the heavier stuff. Then right around the time I graduated from high school, I don't mean to date anybody here, but I started to go see this local heavy band called Damien at Kip South, man. And I was just like, man, these guys are so badass. The Priest thing had it nailed down. The originals were dope. I was into it. And then you know, from there I started getting into trying to get bands together to play heavy stuff. And then a local derelict named Carl Herkimer introduced me to this band called Slayer in 1985, maybe 84. He put on this record. It went into his room, and it's just dusty, dirty, and you know, he's so stinky, and every record's on the floor out of the case. Anybody that knows Carl knows that it's the truth. I love Carl though, but so he puts on this record, and it's Hell Awaits by Slayer. And as soon as it started playing, I was just like, I only want to do this forever. This is it. And it was just like Slayer, Venom, Possessed, you know. And then, but I had it kept a punk edge too. Thank you down there at the end, sir. Because of, you know, the local influence, like Matt said, that come out of here, man. So it was like a lot of DKs, Necros, Black Flag, Suicidal, DRI, along with the metal stuff, and I just kind of tried to mix it from there. Blam! Here I am sitting on a panel with these dudes. Awesome.
And Steve, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of that too, because of course you've done a tremendous amount of guitar work for a variety of bands and influencing a lot of people with your knowledge of music. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got interested in music, interested in metal, and kind of took up the guitar and maybe some of the ways that you purchased metal, and then we'll move along with Bill too.
Yeah, because I'm quite reticent to call myself a musician around these guys because I'm always too chicken to get into a band and go more than 30 miles away from my home, so that's probably why I never did anything about it. But we had music in my household, but nobody actually played. My dad listened to a lot of jazz, and so when I came around and was born in '64, he was still young enough to appreciate what was current. So we had a lot of Beatles in the house. We had Love and Spoonful. We had some world music in the form of Miriam Makeba, stuff like that. You know, it wasn't highbrow, but it was enough to give me pictures of me carrying around a record when I was like almost to tip over because of the weight of a 33 RPM record, so you can imagine how small I was. Still am. And gee, I always bought records. Whenever I had money, I bought records. I'd go to like Woolworth's basement and then sell a spindle of cutout 45s with a hole drilled through all of them just so they didn't have to sell them full price. And I didn't care what they were. They had lots of pretty different colors on the labels, and I would listen to anything. And so, you know, today my favorite song is a Supreme song. Tomorrow my favorite song is Walking the Black Forest. It just was all over the map. But then I started to notice as I got older, there was a key moment when I was in 4th grade, and there was a talent assembly, and the 8th grade girls had worked up a dance routine to Smoke on the Water. As a 4th grader, I wasn't really certain why I enjoyed that so much, but I went out and immediately, with my allowance, I bought the first LP that I actually purchased with my own money, and that was Machine Head. So I think that's the same story for a lot of people. And I think similar to a lot of people, the reason I started playing an instrument was because Ace Frehley looked cool doing it and didn't sound too bad either. I mean, he wasn't a technician or anything, but you put any number of guitarists our age into a room, and half of them are going to say they started playing because of Kiss. Okay.
Just before the thought gets away, as Kevin mentioned CKLW earlier,
Yeah.
and you mentioned Deep Purple, I think that everybody has a little bit of CKLW's DNA in this age group.
Yeah.
Brain, because they used to spin, like, you know, Smoke on the Water in the roller coaster.
Yeah,
like,
it didn't matter. Mix and match.
Yeah, so it was important.
And all through that time period, I was still buying popular music, but I would notice, like, if I would buy a Kiss album, and I would play the heavy song, like I would play Strange Ways. If I had Four-Wheel Drive by BTO, I would play, what's the really heavy one? It always ended up being the last track on the first side. I could never figure out why. If you had Aerosmith Rocks, you played Combination, because you knew the last track on the first side was just going to be smoking and heavy. And that led me toward that whole thing. I probably would have gotten onto the punk thing a little earlier if I hadn't kept buying Circus Magazine and having Ted Nugent tell me that punk was crap and all this new punk stuff is garbage, because it isn't garbage. And once we all got together, when I first found out about hardcore, the guys in the band were referring to myself and my cohorts as the metal dudes. And it was a term of endearment, but it was like a poke at us too. And pretty soon we found out that we all like Motorhead and we all love Discharge. Okay, everybody, I mean, like the common ground at that time was Discharge. Is it punk? Is it metal? Who cares? It's aggressive. And so we just started seeking out that stuff. And if this goes on long enough, I would go into like how you obtain the music and how difficult it was to obtain music. But I think Bill can speak to that just probably better.
But not to keep taking over, but as Steve said, who cares? I think the Midwest scene was really important in that who cares attitude. The coast were very regimented in this is punk, this is metal.
Mm-hmm.
Toledo was like, I have friends, I like music. The barriers were really, they were kicked around and fun was poked at each other. But I think that the Detroit-Toledo scene really did wonders for breaking that down years before you could mix up a bill in L.A. with, say, like Discharge and
Slayer.
Yeah, Slayer or whoever. Yeah.
Megadeth. You guys toured with Megadeth, right? I mean, there you go. Necros and Megadeth on a tour.
Yeah, Bill, maybe you can speak a little bit about how you got introduced to music, metal music, and then kind of beginning into the collecting and live show experience.
I think as far as my introduction, I was a 13-year-old when Kiss Alive came out, and I got it for Christmas one year. Then I was fortunate enough to see him on the next tour at the Sports Arena, the Destroyer tour, and after that I was hooked on hard rock. From there I just progressed, I had an older brother that was a big influence on me. He went to the record shows, he went to the shops, and he played a lot of things like Budgie and Humble Pie and Uriah Heep, Sabbath, Lucifer's Friend. So I got exposed to the heavier side of music too, but it just all progressed. I think the Sports Arena was great because we had a lot of shows come to our town that I don't think hit everywhere. I managed to find Damien early on, and really got into Chuck because Chuck reminded me of Michael Schenker, who was probably my guitar idol. I did have a Neck Rose record. I didn't play. I never played an instrument. I spent all my money on shows and albums, and all my time went to listening, I guess. But I shopped at, Steve had a great record store. I remember buying Kerrang there. I think one of the most influential albums in my listening was Accept's Restless and Wild. That, I put that on. It was just like, that led me into all the newer German bands, or the 80 German bands like Halloween and Gravedigger, bands like that. I still like some of the new stuff. I have a son that's been in a hardcore, what do they call it, grindcore band sing, so I've been exposed to like All That Remains, and there's some semi-local bands I think too, that Double Wears Prada, Attack, they're bands from Ohio that play grindcore, hardcore, that my son's band's open for, and I enjoy that music too. But I like the old days when you had the shops that you could go into, because now it seems like everything's internet driven. Because I bought more stuff because it had a cool album cover, or it had somebody's name on it that I recognized, or it was and it was just like, I had never heard it, and it looked cool, and I bought it. And you can't browse anymore, it's hard to, although YouTube helps a little bit also, but as far as, listening to things, we had a decent radio station in town, and for those who don't know, CKLW is actually out of Canada. And I do remember those days. I had one of those little, anybody remember the little round radios, like a little transistor?
They didn't sound true.
No. But you could get CKLW on there, so. But just going back, I think Kiss Alive, and you mentioned that Kiss kind of influenced a lot of people. As a kid, knowing that was recorded at Cobo Hall, and we watched wrestling that was at Cobo Hall, and the Pistons, it was just like, it was kind of like our thing, because here's a band, Kiss, they're doing one of the best live albums up to date, at a venue that we were familiar with, and
of course it turned out to be fake, but
well, we all bought in. Yeah. But that was the other point I wanted to make too, is that I was a big fan of, and I don't know why it doesn't happen so much anymore, but I think, I look at the live albums when I was growing up, like All the World's a Stage, Strangers in the Night, the Deep Purple had one, Uriah Heep live album. I mean, it was just like everybody had a great live album, and I think there's something about a live show that, if you want to know why people like metal, it's when you go to the live show and your hair stands up on, the back of your neck and stuff. It's just like, it's cool. So.
And so the role of the record store, of course, because that's something that's been brought up a few times, and of course, one of my fondest memories is going with Andy to Special Records. And there was, it's an independent record store, it's no longer with us. Browsing through the records, and boy, we came across two classic albums, Accept's Restless and Wild, and Metallica's Ride the Lightning, before they were signed to Elektra, when they were still on Music for Nations. And we asked Steve Athenas, who was a buddy of ours, who owned the store and ran the shop and brought in all these kind of cool, obscure records, and we asked him to play those two albums, and again, we both were absolutely floored. And again, there's some of those memorable moments. So maybe folks can talk a little bit about maybe the challenges of living in a Toledo, Ohio area and trying to find some of these obscure records, or trying to find some of these sound recordings that later became influential.
I could probably.
Have you heard these guys? Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about your record buying experiences and some of the records that you ended up, maybe, looking for, trying to find, and or any of the in-stores that took place at some of those record stores and so on.
That's what I was going to say, in-store, National Record Mart. There was another store, National Record Mart at the Southwick Mall.
Yeah.
And we did an in-store signing thing, and that was kind of a big deal. I don't know, when we did our albums, we were like signing autographs for like 2 or 3 hours. Not, it seemed like it. I don't know. It was like from the front of the store to the back, like 4 lines to each one of our table. You know, to each one of us, like this table here. It was like then they were taking everything off the walls. Just, you know, like things that weren't even. I don't think they were even daily just to sign something. I mean, they ran out of there. We had a bunch of promotion posters and things, and they all disappeared. And, but I used to go to National Record Mart to see what the new Sabbath album was or something. I mean, I would be, once again, I'd go there and, you know, once, just like looking at the cover, and then they would play the records, so that was kind of cool, and I'd go, oh man, okay, I'll get that, you know, and
I remember another, it was real important, the mom and pop record stores were definitely an important part of not only our band, but for other bands, because they seem to carry the imports. And there's another chain called Abbey Road, who I remember going to Abbey Road or Boogie or Specials and looking through the imports. And a lot of times, these guys were right. You base your choice on the cover of the album, how cool it looked, or the name of the band. Sometimes that didn't always work out. But those bands also, for those record stores for us were also essential that they supported us. Abbey Road and Boogie, and these stores would put up displays for us, and we'd do the in-stores and stuff like that. But I think that you don't see the mom and pops anymore because everything's gone to the internet, or or they've been pushed out by chains. But it's kind of sad to see that, because you build relationships with them stores too. And not only in Toledo, but I remember we would sell records to stores in Kansas that were mom and pop stores and stuff like that. And just sad to see it go, because everything's turned to the internet now, which is fine, and that's the way it is. But you miss that connection you had with people who ran those stores and who helped not only you but the fans. And there's kind of a connection there that you don't see anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Todd, we'll go to you in reference to some of your record purchasing experiences, and then we'll break it down with each band in reference to experiences that you folks have had. So
there's still a store called Ramalama in Toledo that's really good. Rob has a really cool metal selection. He cares. This is okay. Hello, check. So, but that's a good store, man. He's got a huge selection of metal in there. And he's not so much of a punk guy, but I mean he can bring it in whatever. And then there used to be a kick-ass store right down the street here, Mad Hatter. Yeah. Jim Comer ran that place, and then Keith Birdman for a while. That was cool. But like, and then back in the early 80s, mid 80s, man, we used to do a lot of tape trading before there was internet. You know, you get all these fanzines, and I still have tapes from guys in France and South America and like Singapore and weird countries I've never heard of, probably fake places. But I have like a demo. This guy in South America from Brazil sent me this demo, and I don't even know what year, but it was. He goes, this band's called Sepultura, they're going to be huge. And I was like, okay, cool, send it. I'll send you, I sent all kinds of crap, just back and forth. I had a whole pile just in case somebody asked for it. But I don't know where that box is. All those cool demos, man. I remember hearing it was just like a garage tape, so it was just like, who knows what they were saying, I don't know. But if I had it now, I'd put it on fucking eBay for $1 million. Nobody believed me, whatever. Because you beat your dog in the bathroom. But, yeah, and then remember, you guys remember the Head Shed? Before it was a fashion store?
The Head Shed before it was the Shed, before it was the Head Shed again?
You're talking about looking at albums, actual albums. So looking at LPs and seeing the artwork and like, cool, you could see it all. They hoped there was like stickers in it and then when everything went to CD, it was like,
yeah.
Oh, I can't see that so well. And then now I'm old and I'm just like, right. No detail. Just make it orange and put your logo on it.
And so, of course, then we'll break it down with some of the music experiences and that sort of thing with regards to each individual band that you guys have been in. And I wanted to kind of do this sort of as a lineage, you know, and this is the reason why I assembled this particular crowd directly. Because I feel like there's definitely a lineage with the whole necro scene, and then leading into Damien, and Damien getting popularized through MTV and having their stuff on Headbangers Ball, and then Todd kind of picking that up into kind of this new generation of metal. So Andy, maybe you can reflect on some of the times you had in necros and post necros, and of course, for those folks who don't know, I mean, necros, again, as I mentioned, were part of that early crossover scene. You know, touring with Megadeth, doing shows with Motorhead, and not a lot of bands were doing that. So Andy, maybe you can, and of course the whole Misfits connection too.
And that aggressive rock deal that you had, because you sold a lot of stuff in Germany.
Yeah, Germany, yeah. Basically, we were just really obnoxious kids, and but really driven as well. And we just had a band in the basement. We heard about this studio, Ambionic Studios, on Sylvania Avenue. And we went over and said, hey, how much to make a tape, Mr. You know, and Mr. Frankel, Joe Frankel. And he told us, and we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, I didn't even take an amplifier. You know, I figured, oh, it's a studio, they have amps, you know, whatever. And ended up doing the demo with the big nose amp. And it just kept steamrolling. We passed the tapes out. A guy in Lansing, Michigan, got a hold of it, who runs Touch and Go, or did run Touch and Go, founded the label, and he put it out. It got a lot of notoriety, and it just steamrolled from there. We went on tour in a van as a summer vacation thing, sold a bunch of records, and then the next year we toured and actually made money, and then we got picked up by, well, I guess I'm getting ahead here. We ended up hooking up with the Misfits, and that was key. And we developed a great brotherhood with those guys. We're probably a few of the people who are actually friends with Glenn and with the Misfits still, because they, as most people know, they had a huge falling out. And we helped them, they helped us quite a bit. Anyhow, then we continued on, got picked up by a minor major, got put on a bunch of crazy bills at that point for a punk band to play with. Megadeth was crazy, and half the shows people loved us, half they absolutely hated us. And the same year we did a tour with the Circle Jerks, who were, you know, a hardcore band. In our minds, why not? I mean, an ideal show for me at the time would be to see like Van Halen opening for Frank Sinatra. So to me it was like, yeah, music, people, fun, friends, let's enjoy it. But I was very naive in how the rest of the world liked their things locked down and regimented for their, social cues and how they reference things. So, but anyhow, it was a great experience.
And Chuck and Kevin, maybe you guys can talk about some of your experiences with Damien, sound recordings, and some of the work that you guys have done post-Damien and still dealing with Damien.
Well, I can give you a part of that. We could probably write an encyclopedia about what we've done over the past 30 years.
Yeah, you know, we have Randy, our singer,
Randy's in the house.
You want to come down and say anything? You can.
I'm enjoying this.
You're enjoying it.
Sorry we blew your cover.
Singer Damien right there.
Yeah, you guys are doing great. I love it. Stuff I hadn't heard before, and I've known these guys for
I didn't hear his
so I'm
stuff.
learning stuff I didn't know before, so that's really good. Nice.
Our goal was to be the bands that we loved. Our goal was to be Iron Maiden or Judas Priest or Black Sabbath, Rainbow, and what we did is and Chuck carried on this before even Randy and Johnny and I, but Chuck already had a reputation as a monster guitar player and playing all these metal tunes and stuff, and.
That monster guitarist, right?
And he still is a monster. But our goal was to be that. So when we watched these bands, and we would see that they'd have these walls of Marshalls, and we couldn't afford that, so we would go out and we would buy plywood and paint, and we'd build these Marshalls, and then we'd buy from Marshall, we'd buy the sticker, the plastic tag, the logo that went on the amp. And we'd even build the heads right down the specification of a Marshall head and put a little LED light in it, so we'd plug it in and you would see this wall of Marshalls. And we'd a giant banner and everything. So when you walked in a club, it looked like you were coming to a concert. And that was always our goal, was to be. We emulated the bands that we wanted to see. So if they had a big crew and a truck and road cases, we went out and built road cases and rented a truck. And
We used to move those around. We went to New York with all those things, and we almost got, we'd be in the back of the U-Haul, and we crushed.
We had all this stuff we built, and it weighed so much. I mean, hernia weight, everything was crazy heavy. And when we would do, we'd come terrain a little bit, and we'd rent U-Hauls, and we'd have all the stuff back there. And sometimes we didn't have room for the crew or the members. They'd have to be back in the cargo area. And I mean, this stuff would slide around. You could get crushed. I mean, it was weird. And we're going, you're back in the dark, right?
On top of stuff.
Yeah, you'd lay on top of everything. It's just, I mean, because you rushed because you wanted to make it happen. You know, I'm sure the story goes on and on. We make great sacrifices. You know, you almost think, well, you're crazy. Sometimes you're saying to yourself, like, what am I doing? Do I really like it that much? But you end up doing it again. Actually, you might even say, a couple times you might think, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. But a day later or two, you start going, I'm going to do this again and again and again, right? Because it gets tough, but you know, because it is really cool when you reach our audience and they love what you're doing. You know, if you can hit that spot, it's pretty much that's pretty high. You know, you get a good feeling off that, and I think you never forget that, and you say, I want to do that again and again, right?
And Todd, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of your experiences, of course, with transitioning from Cornflakes, Lazy American Workers, Guar, into your current project, Mobile Death Camp.
Yeah, just basically all the stories are all the same, just the names of the bands change.
That's true.
You know, it's awesome. I wouldn't change it for the world, you know, but it's the worst thing I've ever done. It's the best thing I've ever done. You know, it's the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you know, started, I guess.
It's heaven and hell.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the question?
Hey, just maybe you could talk a little bit about this transition between some of the bands that you've been in and then your current project.
Hopping band to band is just, I've been super driven to, just to be in a band, like these guys said. Always wanted to be the band that we love, and play the music that I like to hear. If I walked into a club, I'm like, that band kicks ass. I want to be that. I want to play like that. I want to do that stuff, And luckily, I've been blessed that some people give a shit about what I've been playing the past 103 years. But from band to band, and then people duck out, and then we call, like I say, they take Plan B. The thing is, the unfortunate reality is, as people start to get older, people drop off, people want to buy cars, people want to get married, people want to have kids, buy houses, and then it's like bills, responsibility, and then like, I can't play the show, I can't go here, I can't go there, and it's just like, okay, so then that band dies, I hop in another band, another, and everyone, just try to keep it going, and it's kind of sad, it's really sad that I have to keep, you have to keep that 16-year-old mentality, like, it's all about the band, dude. The band or nothing, man. It's the band. It's the most important thing. I don't know how many, and nobody knows how unreasonable it is more than me, and everyone sitting here, obviously, and it's just, but at the same time, fuck it, that's what it is. Like the glamour,
I was going to say there's probably maybe like 120 years of playing experience at this table right now, and I know that nobody here is like rolling in dough because they're that one, but everybody still does.
I was just going to touch on how glamorous my life is right now with a 5x10 storage unit. And I tour a lot. We do 200 some odd dates a year, and I love it. But people are like, oh yeah, and then when I got hired by Guar, people are all of a sudden like, oh, you must have a Hummer. You must have a house on Lake Erie. I'm like, Lake Erie. But, no, we get paid when we're on tour, and it's not a king's ransom, and then when you're not on tour,
that's a really
you're paid. The overhead is insane. So
what you brought up is a great point, that when the hardcore thing was going on with metal and punk, we would all go on these tours for sometimes 6 months at a time, and we would come home penniless. And Steve, he used to hang out at the pad, as we called it.
Yeah.
As did you, Matt. You know, we paid $100 a month for this tiny apartment in a horrible neighborhood, and that's where we lived. when we were
Because you're
home.
only there half the time,
Right.
and it was good enough. I mean,
But it was
had a
we lived
refrigerator.
we lived way better on the road, you know, than we did at home. And then you get home and you have no money. All your friends are graduating from college, and you're just like, okay, book another tour.
I want a Jeep. I want a snowmobile. Get in the van.
Yeah.
This is a really good story about how Damien was discovered. Maybe someone would like to address that. How you were discovered. How a record label found them.
How did that go?
Well, it wasn't just an overnight thing. It was a long process, and we got
It's like in
together.
that building that show up.
One of the things that really helped us discover is our drummer Johnny Cavallari. His Aunt Ruby, lady named Ruby Starr, sang for Black Oak, Arkansas, and a bunch of other bands, and she knew Johnny and Randy before they were even in Damien. Of course, she's Johnny's aunt. So after we got going and stuff, she really helped us out, introducing us to some people in the business, and that led from one thing to another to people that got interested in us, and because we had such a loyal following around this area, they saw the reaction of the fans in this area, and that kind of launched it. But I don't think it was an overnight thing getting discovered. It was more of a one person led to another, that led to another, that opened another door, that opened another door.
Talking about the snowstorm and our first gig. Did you get storm? And,
Oh.
Well, we kept practicing.
Right, we practiced for 2 years before we ever played a show. We were in a warehouse, we rented the warehouse, we all pitched in every month and
Paid the rent.
and for almost 2 years we practiced constantly. We went out and did our first show, and they would only give us a Monday night. And we took the Monday night, and by this time we'd already built a good following, and it was winter. And that night there was a huge snowstorm, almost blizzard conditions, and on a Monday night in a blizzard, 880 people showed up. And the club sold out of beer. They sold out of alcohol. So that was the first night we launched. But,
What year was that, you think?
I don't know.
84? Yeah, I was at that fucking show.
And it was crazy.
And I drove down from Temperance.
Well, we broke the
The snowstorm.
and we had the attendance record.
Damien.
Yeah, and that was the launch of us selling out those clubs all the time. But what happened to us for the next 10 years that most people don't realize is that we always got stuck on a Monday or Tuesday night. They would the club owners in this town back then, clubs would be filled 7 nights a week. So you'd have these cover bands playing on the weekends, and they would never give us a weekend. So we always, for years, played Monday night, Tuesday night. And we would fill the club every night, but the thing was, we would have to run our own PA system and our own lights. And because we had to be this huge band, we would go get a huge PA system and this huge light show and rent this truck, and we'd get paid $500. So by the time we rented our lights and our PA,
It was free.
we lost money every day. So for our first 5, 6, 10 years of the band, we were playing all these huge shows and selling out these shows, but we never made a dime. Because we put all of our money back into the show, and the club would never play us, and he would only give us $500 and tell us, well, you got to rent your own PA and your own lights.
So at the request of Jeremy, we're going to take this session up to 2, and then we're going to address some questions a little bit after 2. We've just got a few minutes left. We'll go along the table. Reflections about the Midwestern music scene, metal music scene, punk rock music scene. Andy, we'll start with you, and then we'll...
The stereotypical attitude toward that kind of personality that you would tend to see is just simply not true. It's certainly not true around here. Maybe there are a lot of underachievers around here or something. I don't know, because people are really smart, but they don't seem to really go anywhere. But that might say something about the community we've got going here. Loved that band. Loved that band. That opened my eyes up to all sorts of different things. I think they might have been the first band to do slow, fast thrash, too. I don't know if Andy would admit it, but they may have actually beat Suicidal Tendencies to that crown. Love Damien. Love Seduce up in Detroit. I feel like that's what you guys used to go see. What, Strut up in Detroit?
Oh, yeah. The Almighty Strut.
The Almighty Strut, or Detroit's Heavy Metal Horror Show, Halloween. There have been so many people that won't even get mentioned in this because the time's too short. There are great musicians out there, and I saw a guy named John Thornton play a flatbed gig in front of a cornfield and open it with the entire 10-minute version of Earthquake off the Electric Sun album, like with his band, in front of a cornfield for like 30 people in a keg, and he pulled it off. So there's that kind of stuff is around here. It's a smart place.
And we'll move along the table rather quickly, Bill, so we can open it up to the floor for questions. Bill, and then we'll move along. Chuck and Kevin and Todd, and then we'll.
This is a great metal market, but I really think that we, more recently we've taken kind of a hit because we lost the sports arena, and we just don't seem to see shows, like we used to get at the sports arena, and there's really no the metal clubs. I mean, there's a couple of clubs that put metal shows on, but I think the biggest thing, we took a little bit of a hit when we lost the River Dome.
And Chuck, we'll go along with you. Last minute reflections on everything.
I just the whole thing about the music thing. Good music just takes you someplace and it's fun. I mean, that's why. That's why we do it. I think you get a good tune and it takes you somewhere away from where you might be. Your regular humdrum. Not that everything's humdrum, but it's a special place you can go, and I think that's why we all do this. And, very good.
Awesome. And Kevin,
I think it's what you make of it. It's hard to guess where any of the scene's going or where music is going or anything like that. You hear people talk about maybe this coming back or that coming back, or I don't think you can look at it that way. I think we just got to keep all plugging away. There's people out there who want to hear good music and who search it out, and I think the internet's made it possible for them to search it out. It's destroyed a lot of the music business in all ways, but I think we just got to make the best of it.
Okay, and Todd, we'll wrap it up with you, and then we'll open up the floor.
I think you made a good point. You said we're hardy in the Midwest, man. Because like Midwest and like the Northeast, just due to the weather and all the conditions, we're hardy people, so work hard, play hard, that kind of thing. That's why music kind of is. Music's good here. And, it's not where you're from, it's where you go, where you take it. You can be from anywhere.
And what you do.
And every band is a local band somewhere, and everybody's from somewhere. People go, oh, geez, you're from Toledo? Well, yeah.
I had from my mom.
Somebody lives somewhere. Local band this, local band that. Well, Metallica's a local band in San Francisco. So, I don't know, the last words, music, woo!
Awesome. All right, now we'll open up the floor for questions. We've got about 10, 15 minutes for questions here.
Of course, give them all a round of applause.
And we'll open up the floor for questions. Are there questions here?
This is for Todd. Your T-shirt says that's from a shop in Salt Lake City. I would have thought that was the only place in the country there wouldn't be a metal shop.
Yeah, that's the irony of it. It's called the Heavy Metal Shop. It's like a real famous thing with a lot of metal. They do in-store things, and the place is probably only as big as the floor here. They do in-store shows.
And we'll kind of, next question.
Well, I got to know how difficult is it to play with all of that shit on that Gwar makes you wear?
The biggest problem was the smell.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
I just want to, not too much a question, I just want to thank you all for coming together to sit at the same table and lend all your stories and your experiences and your opinions, because this is like church for some of us. This is the best way to spend a Sunday if you really, really like metal and you adore it. And I think one time I was shopping in Kroger's on Monroe Street, and I saw a guy with a T-shirt that said Porn Flakes. And he was with his wife and his kid, and I just thought, what the heck? But I'm going to have to come out the next time you do a gig. Also, that guy who ran Mad Hatter, Cromer was his name?
Jim Comer.
Comer.
I owe him $20 if you could hook me up with him.
Yeah, I can get that to him.
Question for all of you guys.
what sort of camaraderie was there with bands from other cities like Cleveland area, Columbus? How receptive were the radio stations? Stuff like that?
I got a camaraderie story. I was in a band called Mother Goose in '84, and we were digging Damien. We always wanted to do shows with them, and our drummer happened to come across their drummer's girlfriend, and those guys surrounded us at Kip South one time. I was just like, "This is your fight. I'm digging this show."
In the hardcore scene,
your crew, man.
We had friends in every city. We put them up, they put us up, and we booked shows together. And we actually booked a lot of our early tours. We had come across Hughes Aircraft's credit card phone numbers back in the day when you would use credit cards to, and we made a list and shared it. I mean, I think every hardcore band in the country had a copy of that by the time the hardcore scene started to slow down.
And as far as the radio station is concerned, we have one major radio station in a fairly small market here, but they would play like the first songs off the first Maiden album or the first Def Leppard album, but sporadically. They started playing Scorpions, maybe Love Drive era. They would play, if you called them and asked them to play, they actually would play, which surprised me since they already had the airwaves by the, anyway.
So. Now it's clear channel.
Yeah, now it's clear channel.
No, you won't hear any of that.
That's why we got to keep one.
I don't have a question, but I just want to let everybody know that it's an extraordinary. I flew out from Seattle, not from this. This was like just a huge benefit. I found out at the last minute. But next weekend on Saturday, Damien will be at it's the Rocket Bar, right? The Rocket
Formerly
Bar.
Roxanne.
Formerly Roxanne. That's where it used to be our house. And it's 30 years. We've been together for 30 years, so it's really an extraordinary moment for us. I'm excited to do it and honored that I'm still playing with these guys after 30 years.
And other questions, comments, ideas?
Right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could just yell.
Horton Donahue Jr.
Metal Man Donahue, as I remember, also got referred to back in the day.
Thanks. As far as talking what Andy said about bands being hooking up with other bands and stuff and type, I remember I saw you with the band back. I think it was, I can't remember what year it was. I think it was. Oh gosh, I can't remember. It was like sometime in
'84.
'84 was it? Yeah. I saw you open up for Big Boys and in Dallas.
Oh yeah.
It was in Dallas, and I was just, my question is that do you still keep in touch with a lot of the bands that you used to tour with and play with back in the day? I guess that goes, for some of you guys also and the rest of the panel, as far as who you keep in touch with still from back then that folks here might know.
Absolutely. Chris Gates, the Big Boys, and Tim Kerr, still on first name basis with. Whenever I'm in Austin, I hook up with Chris and we hang out. Same with the Misfits. Whenever I see those guys, if I'm in LA, I'll look up Glenn, but Glenn's not a hey, how's your mother kind of guy.
What kind of guy is this?
He's actually used to. Not to get off the subject, this is the funniest thing for anybody who loves Danzig. One time he was staying in Toledo at our house, and he came after 3 shows of blood and gore and death. He came down for breakfast and he was wearing a purple sweatshirt, white Nikes, and faded light jeans, and he looked like he was like this tall because he wasn't wearing the boots and all the black leather and everything. Great guy, super guy, love him. But yes, we stay in touch with all those bands.
Awesome. Chuck, you guys still keep in touch with some of the guys you used to go tour with back in the day?
I can't say I'm so busy teaching and doing things. It's really, I run into people like that, but I'm so busy, I really don't have time to even get on the internet sometimes do stuff. So I'm going to say that I'm kind of just working on doing my thing, but of course, every year Damien gets together and it's like we reunite. It's kind of neat. Randy came in a couple days ago and I was like, wow, that was a year ago. I saw it. It's kind of cool. It was like family getting back together and we get ready for these shows. That's really neat. But I wish I could say I could keep in touch with more people, but boy, there's so many people, it's unbelievable. I just spend like 2 seconds for each person and get through 1/10 of the people that I've been around. You know what I mean? That's how so it's
you know, and got family.
And it should be noted too, the contribution that Chuck's made to the scene here is absolutely incredible because he's taught thousands of students on guitar and has helped to inspire others. So that also needs to be noted. And then Kevin and Todd, maybe you could talk about if you guys stay in touch with any of the bands that you guys used to be in, or bands that you guys tour in, or members and so on.
We tried to. I did some stuff with David Chastain, and I have not talked to him recently. We do stay in touch. Beyond that, it's the past few years have been just, I don't know, we're kind of getting back into that. Damien had a lull for a while. We had a few years where we were really quiet, and things have picked up. And in that sense, we're making a lot of new contacts, and that's kind of where it's been more of that lately than the old stuff, I would say.
And Todd?
Yeah, I mean we're still real active, so I still roll across a lot of people I've always seen before. Last night I was up at the Anthrax Exodus show in Detroit, and I'm friends with the Exodus dudes and Eye on Fire and Municipal Waste, so that was a good time to run back into those cats.
Awesome. We got one question here.
Hi guys, I'm Jérôme from France, and it was so cool to hear you because you know, I used to be a bass player too, and I would like to say it's the same thing in France, and at the same time it's so exotic to me to hear what you are saying. I just wanted to ask you something. I translated in French 6 years ago a chapter of Harris Berger book, Metal, Rock and Jazz. We were talking about a musician, Dan Saladin, and his band were Sin Eater and Scumlord. I don't know if you understand what I say. Dan Saladin, Dan, you know that man? No. Okay, so he was talking about metal scene, extreme metal scene in Ohio, in Columbus and Akron,
Columbus,
1993, yeah. And well, it was great. It was the first time I heard about Ohio, and now I'm here.
I think Todd is probably the most closely aligned with like the more extreme stuff that's been going on with it over the past 20 years. But I know Columbus has always had a scene. I just never go down there. Yeah, that's a big university town. I mean, a big university. It's the big state university, and it's also the state capital. So there are all kinds of musicians floating around down there. I'm not aware of an extreme metal scene up in Northwest Ohio at all. Anything like particularly brutal. Are you?
We're not too bad.
No, I mean, I know.
This fucking guy, right?
But extreme metal. Butcher animals.
Yeah.
All right, we have one final question, and then we will. I'll have a last-minute comment, and then we will wrap things up.
I have a personal interest in the development of metal communities. I'm wondering who are the successors? Who inherits the Toledo metal scene? What's happening with the younger bands, and how active are they?
There's a lot of younger bands coming out. I mean, it's just, you know, whoever sticks with it. You know, whoever sticks with it the most, who's the most persistent. You know, who's willing to give the most sacrifices to, you know, who doesn't want to get involved with too much responsibility. You know, who wants to remain a jackass their whole life and carry the torch. I mean, it's sad and true. That's, you know.
But there is a lot of
I have a son,
responsibility, you know.
Sure. I mean, we're not lazy by any means. I mean, it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
Even if we got a minimum wage for every hour that you put into this, you know, I would have that honor.
Yeah, I think it's more like hardcore metal bands now, not really traditional metal bands. I mean, there are a few, I guess, but they're not new. I don't see like 19, 20-year-old kids forming traditional metal bands and more hardcore metal bands, I think, in Toledo.
More like the screamy stuff, yeah.
Right.
To put a fine point on the answer to your question, though, is metal and hardcore has existed for 40 years now, completely independent of whatever's going on in the mainstream. Whatever radio's doing, whatever MTV's doing.
Right.
I mean, there was times when Black Sabbath wasn't played at all, and they could still sell out 90% of the houses in the United States. So I think that for the new wave of kids, it's just a matter of them doing it. I don't think they're dependent on the established chains of commercial enterprises for their success. They'll make it happen.
And we'd like to give a round of applause, and we'll have one final comment here. I, of course, want to thank my fellow musicians and friends for taking the time, your valuable time, to come here and participate in this roundtable. I also want to take the time to thank everyone who came from so far away to be able to participate, share their knowledge, and share their stories in reference to heavy metal music and heavy metal culture. How appropriate that when Dr. Ray Brown, who saw popular culture as the sword of democracy, and one of the first conferences held for popular culture took place in Northwest Ohio, that we would have this unique happening here on heavy metal music, one of the first of its kind in North America, happening here in this region of Ohio. And we want to thank you so much for your time, energy, and effort as a fellow road warrior. I know how it goes. Thank you so much for your time. We are so grateful. We hope folks have a wonderful, of course, safe trip home. It's not over yet. We still have one more session. Thanks for your time. Yep.
Jusqu'à la mort.